points and promotions, which was a very popular feature of Civ 4. That's already in place right now. Civics is in place, the health system, a maintenance system for which sort of replaced the corruption and waste system from the previous games is in place. The whole idea of matching up improvements with resources, which was actually Dorian's idea, is in place right now, where if you have some wheat, there's a big bonus if you build a farm on it. If there's some iron, there's a big bonus if you build a mine on it, and you have to research the appropriate technologies to be able to build the appropriate improvements. We also have integrated Python and XML at this point, which was basically the way we saw the future for modding. When we sat down to design Civ 4, we really wanted to find out a way to make it as open as possible to modders. And having a scripting language like Python gives them access to algorithmic content, and using XML means that all of the sort of data in the game, the numbers and the text, would always be in a format that would be easy for modders to modify using various XML editors. The game was designed about halfway through, up through the Middle Ages. And so, there's a big focus on getting all the gameplay features in at this point. And we were testing them out every week, in our gameplay sessions, and, starting to have fun with the game. Graphically, we're still, really focused on, prototype art at this point. Everything still looks pretty basic. We did, however, start to move towards a little more of a tile-based system graphically. As you can see, the rivers and the hills are now tile-based. They're no longer sort of winding through tiles as they will. You can actually see that the rivers sort of delineate the boundaries between tiles. As far as interface is concerned, we're working on a dynamic help system so that everything you mouse over gives you some specific information about it. The first pop-ups are now added to the game, so when you choose a tech, you get a choice, and it provides you some info about that. The city and the diplomacy screen are just starting to be implemented, although the city screen will be worked on. Well, both of those screens will be worked on through the rest of the project, but a rudimentary system is in place so that people can play the game, which is the important part. So now I'd like to go into detail about one of these systems that we were adding this early in the game, and that's the civic system. The civic system was basically the new government system. In the previous Civ games, you would choose one monolithic government type, either democracy or communism or monarchy or what have you, and each of them had various different effects. But it wasn't a very flexible system. Oftentimes, people sort of, favor just one system more or less, and it didn't really play a big part of the game. So we took a nod from a sort of a Civ spin-off game called Alpha Centauri, which had something called social engineering, which lets you sort of choose a number of government types a la carte from a menu, basically. And so we adopted a similar thing where you can choose various legal systems, various religious systems, various economic systems. Like you could have free market or welfare state, for example. And this system proved to be a lot of fun, but it took a long time to develop. There was a civic system in place at this point, but the actual civic choices themselves changed continually through the project. There's a number of types that we picked up and abandoned. For example, Federal Reserve, legalism, state atheism, fundamentalism. They're all various types that we tried at one point, and it just didn't work. Some of those bad ideas, for example, there used to be a blind research option where you chose a civic, which gave you a benefit, but it didn't let you choose what technology you were researching. We thought that would be an interesting trade-off, but it just wasn't much fun. People like to be able to make the choices. People like to be king. Similarly, we had another system, I believe it was tied to vassalage, where you got a nice military bonus, but you were no longer able to choose what your cities were producing. The idea there being, you had your vassals and they kind of did whatever they want to. Once again, just not much fun. Another system allowed you to build your military units with food as well as production. Just really hard to balance, as well as another one, which was the Federal Reserve, which gave you an interest rate on your treasury. It was almost impossible to get that number right, the percentage number right. If it was too high, people would just have insane amounts of gold because it sort of feeds off itself, sort of compounding interest. Whereas if the number is really low, well, no one's going to choose it. It's just not going to be useful, and eventually we just scrap the idea. So now we're to version C, which is from May of 2004. So at this point, we're about a year into the project, and we're still have a real heavy focus here on gameplay. A number of the more out there ideas that eventually became part of Civ 4 are sort of in place at this point. There's a religion system right now. There's a great people system. You're great artists, you're great scientists, and so on. There are now multiple leaders per Civ with traits associated with them. The workers and settlers now build from food, which was, I think, an important change that allowed us to fix some sort of gameplay stumbling blocks from the previous Civ games. There are happiness and culture sliders. There's one tweak that I've also thought was very, very important to making the game more fun, which was the two-move worker, which basically allowed you to move your worker and give it a build choice in the same turn. That really helped speed the game along because you weren't jumping from your worker unit to worker unit as often. Further, the game is now designed all the way to the modern age. Basically every game element is in place, all the way up to jet fighters and stealth bombers. The graphics of the game are still sort of moving along relatively slowly. We're kind of experimenting with different palettes. As you can see, there's a really saturated terrain palette in place at this point. The colors of the grasslands and the plains are really bright. This would change again in the future, and I'll explain why when we get there. There are now font icons for the help system to sort of help reinforce certain concepts. So a shield or a piece of food or an iron icon will look the same no matter where it's referenced in the game. There are more pop-ups are now appearing for like city production. We have a very early advisor system built off of the Python. It's not particularly useful, but we just wanted to make sure the Python was working and that it could give us what we needed. And we have some intro screens and a multiplayer lobby at this point. Just some basic functionality to help us while we play and test the game. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about what we term the play session, which is a group of people outside the company who were playing Civ 4 up to a year and a half before we released. We started really small, about 10 or 20 people during the summer of 2004. This was an invitation-only group. There was never any public announcement about this group, and they were actually called from our fan community. We are directly involved with the community. The two major fan sites, Civ Fanatics and Napolitan, we spend a lot of time on, so we get to know the people, the fans there, get to know them from their postings, start to develop a relationship with them, and we're able to sort of bring them sort of behind the wall to let them take an early look at the game, so we get their feedback right away. That's invaluable. That's such a great resource. Civ 3, we had to make a lot of changes after release based off of some really basic feedback we got from them afterwards. So we just wanted to get it ahead of time this time. It got up to around 100, 150 by release date, and we had specific leads from the community for single player, multiplayer, and modding. We picked people who we felt could lead each specific groups because we wanted to make sure that each of those groups was happy with Civ 4. This also required us to come up with basically a bi-weekly patch system, which added a significant amount of overhead to the project, but we felt getting that feedback was worth it. So now we're up to version D from a few months later in August of 2004. We're still spending a lot of time modifying the gameplay over the last few months. But the tweaks are much more subtle. Most of the broad strokes are done at this point. There's sort of a new religion system that is a modification of the previous one. There is impassable terrain in the game now. Ice and peaks. Units can't move through them anymore. Great people are now tied to golden ages. Which I think was an important improvement for both systems. Victory types are now in place. Your cultural victory, your spaceship victory, and so on. And some of the game options that we knew people were going to really enjoy, we put in place right now, like different game speeds for people who want a really fast game or people want an epic game. the map scripts are now in place. This is a really big deal. This was using the Python scripting language.